Good morning. Thank you all for attending and for your patience while we sorted out the audio problems that we encountered. We'd hoped to get off to a slightly earlier start, but sometimes things don't work out the way we wanted to. So this is a 32nd meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs, and this committee is convening its first public hearing today pursuant to its inquiry into Trinidad and Tobago's performance in negotiating or creating opportunities for trade outside of CARICOM. There are various entities represented here. We have the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, Export-Import Bank of Trinidad and Tobago Limited, and the National Export Facilitation Organization of Trinidad and Tobago. I was about to say gentlemen, and then I realized happily that there are actually a few women amongst you. But I will start perhaps going this way with Mr. Guichard and ask you all to introduce yourselves, and then we will introduce ourselves to the listening and viewing public.
Good morning. My name is Dietrich Guichard, Chief Executive Officer of exportTT, the National Trade Export Facilitation Organization of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Navin Dukaran. I'm the CEO of the EXIMBANK, the Export-Import Bank of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning, Chairman and members. My name is John Tangian. I'm the Chairman of the EXIMBANK of Trinidad and Tobago Limited.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. I'm Rita Toussaint, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. My name is Tedwin Herbert. I am Acting Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Norris Herbert, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. My name is Jennifer Lutchman, and I'm the Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Investments Division.
Good morning, each one. My name is Yvette Bab. I am the Acting Director of Social and Economic Transformation, Investment Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning to everyone. Randall Karim, the Director of Policy in the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Good morning, Trudy Lewis, Senior Economist, Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Hi, good morning, Neville Alexander, Senior Economist at the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Good morning all. Bruce Lai, Director European Affairs, Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs.
Good morning, Greg Laughlin, EXIMBANK Director.
Good morning, Danraj Hariprasad, Manager of Monitoring and Research at exportTT.
Madam Chair, morning. Brian Benjamin, Manager Enabling Environment, exportTT Limited.
Thank you all very much. I'll now ask members of this committee to introduce themselves.
Good morning all. I'm Vidya Gayadeen Gopi Singh, member.
Morning everyone, Lester Henry, member.
Good morning, Clarence Rambarat, member.
Good morning, Terence D.L. Singh, member.
And I'm Sophia Choate. I'm the chairman of this committee, and the member to my right, Senator Rambarat, is the vice chairman of this committee. Now, there are certain things that we have to do because we have a listening and viewing public. So I'm going to set out the three objectives of this inquiry. One, to examine the policies and initiatives of the state as executed through the Ministry of Trade and Industry that are aimed at facilitating and expanding extra-regional trade. Two, to evaluate the performance of the Ministry of Trade and Industry in relation to capitalizing on the business and investment opportunities associated with trade agreements. 3, to ascertain the benefits of existing trade agreements between Trinidad and Tobago and countries external to CARICOM. And 4, to determine whether businesses are experiencing challenges in facilitating extra-regional trade. Now, we will begin with opening statements from representatives of the entities present here. So, I will ask first for a 2-minute statement, if you can, from Mr. Norris Herbert, the PS for the Ministry of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, Chair and members. Thanks for the opportunity to respond and participate in this session of the JSC. I would first like to start by sharing that trade is considered to be a lifeblood of any economy, and MTI, which I may use for short, recognizes the importance of the growing trade within CARICOM as well as countries outside of CARICOM. This is evidenced by the extensive research, policies, projects, programs, trade missions, trade investment agreements, as well as the various institutions and people that ensure that various initiatives are implemented towards stimulating trade, both in the energy and non-energy sectors. Whilst CARICOM has been a major trading partner for Trinidad and Tobago, MTI, and by extension the government, has worked on assiduously diversifying the quantum and diversity of goods and services exported and the number of markets that these goods and services are exported to, whilst building on existing economic relationships in North America, Europe, etc. Efforts are underway to penetrate into economies in Central and South America, as well as Asia and African continents. Each market has its advantages and disadvantages, but as you will notice from our submission, strategic research and policies, coupled with active engagement on the ground and its related agencies, will ensure that we utilize scarce resources to focus. A tangible manifestation of the Ministry's commitment is its new trade policy, which it recently launched. In addition, the effort to facilitate through an enabling environment for international trade to increase production and export value-added goods and services, to increase the share of CARICOM trade inclusive of trade and services. The policy outlines government's trade-related interventions and measures aimed at increasing production, improving competitiveness, and diversifying exports. Therefore, Chair, I wish to inform you that Ministry of Trade and Industry and the team here today is willing to cooperate and to answer questions and provide clarification on any issues which may be put before us. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. May I now ask Ms. Toussaint?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, members of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs, colleagues, good morning. The Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs has noted the objectives of this inquiry, and it is hoped that our participation today would provide the information required. The Ministry recognizes that the attraction of foreign trade and investment remains critically important, and amongst activities to this end, our participation in the trade negotiations in multilateral fora, as well as engaging bilaterally with other countries. Trinidad and Tobago's missions also play a supportive role in response to trade and investment promotion activities undertaken by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Collaboration with the Ministry of Trade and Industry and other entities includes support for trade missions, participation in trade fairs, protection of Trinidad and Tobago's interests with respect to international trade policy issues discussed at multilateral fora, such as the World Trade Organization. We also support in the preparation of briefing documents, input into meetings that other agencies have to attend, and joint participation on committees. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Could we have 2 minutes of introduction from Ms. Lutchman?
Good morning again, Madam Chair and members. The mandate of the Ministry of Finance includes, among other things, the trade facilitation and the management of the state enterprises sector, one of which is the EXIMBANK. With regard to trade facilitation, one of the mechanisms that the government has implemented was the EXIMBANK 100 million US foreign exchange facility to benefit manufacturers who wish to access foreign exchange in order to expand exports, increase foreign exchange earnings, and employment. Government approved US $10 million in the first instance for this facility, which was fully utilized. Another 10 million US was approved, and I would like to report from August 2018 to September 30th, 2019, 42 manufacturers across 10 sectors would have benefited in the amount of over $12 million US from this facility. We look forward to assisting this committee in providing any other information that is required for this inquiry.
Thank you very much. May I now ask Mr. Tang Nyang to do an introduction?
Good morning, members, once again. Well, EXIMBANK is what is considered the finance arm of the whole export trust, Trinidad and Tobago. The product line that we have on offer are all geared towards assisting clients in the whole manufacturing process and also in the export thrust. Foreign exchange being the objective. Within recent times, well, actually, to be exact, in August of 2018, the Ministry of Finance approved a line of $100 million credit of foreign exchange. To date, I will just give a more up-to-date figure of all the clients that have benefited from this facility. So far, we have served 47 companies who have benefited. We have approved of the $21.2 million to date. There's an undrawn element of $7.4 million still to be drawn of that facility. So from our perspective, the facility, whilst in the beginning, had a little challenge in the pickup, but I think we have reached this point where we have seen the acceleration of it, and a lot more people are benefiting, and we have provided some figures to the committee where all the sectors that have benefited from it is a cross-section of sectors, not just one or two sectors. And in collaboration with the exportTT and the TTMA, we have actually provided another perspective of how do we get this into the deserving markets. And there's a particular product that we have just recently developed that's subject to approval that we feel will accelerate this whole process. But the whole collaborative effort is where we see the benefits. And with the support of the Ministry of Finance and the exportTT and TTMA, we have seen the results going forward. So we see this thrust as the way forward. And I'm looking forward to a lot more clients and the sectors that will benefit from the facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Guichard?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. exportTT is the National Export Facilitation Organization of Trinidad and Tobago. We are charged with generating export growth and diversification of the non-energy goods and services sectors. Catering to the needs of all exporters, exportTT focus on building internationally competitive firms, improving the environment, and harnessing the different factors that set Trinidad and Tobago exporters apart in the global market. As a trade policy implementation agency of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, we provide a comprehensive range of services to exporters, focused on increasing non-energy exports, increasing the number of exporters, and delivering value for money. Our ultimate objective is developing a sustainable and diversified export sector for Trinidad and Tobago. We are customer-centric, results-driven, and home to the resident expertise in matters of international trade.
Thank you, Mr. Guichard.
Thank you very much. To open the questions, a lot of times when we talk about creating opportunities for trade outside of the region, we don't take into consideration what is happening in those markets that we wish to enter. So I want to direct the question to P.S. Herbert, and the question is in relation to what is happening in the desirable markets for Trinidad and Tobago products in the context of new challenges and existing challenges. And I just want to say, for example, in agriculture, the European Union continues to put in place their own requirements, and we have to constantly be trying to meet EU standards. One area is in maximum residue levels, for example. And the other thing is that the EU has demonstrated that it is quite prepared to operate outside Codex. And if they do that, then they would be interfering with what is a core of the WTO arrangement. So my question is, what is happening in those desirable markets, in particular the US and EU, and how is it affecting our ability to enter those markets?
Thank you, Vice Chair, through you. I'm thankful for that question, because I think that trade in markets, it will happen whether we have agreements or no agreements. And as government, we are really facilitating the private sector that trades. So our task is really to help our businesses, our manufacturers, even our agricultural exporters, non-agricultural, and to, as far as possible, provide the type of information that is necessary to allow them to be successful. Now, there are many actions that would be taken in these markets, especially markets mentioned by the Vice Chairman, and he referred to the European Union and the North America, which are really our traditional markets. And a case in point, he spoke about residues, and I think one of the issues was like this cadmium from chocolate, from cocoa or chocolate, right? And these issues are notified on the international trade mechanism. So one of the things we do is we have a system of throwing up these issues when they come and sharing it with our various stakeholders. Also, in the form of representation, we have systems where we make representation. For instance, in some cases, we are able to delay implementation where we cannot stop it. In some cases, we may not be able to stop it, but at least we are able to give any kind of technical assistance we can to treat with it. And in doing that, we think that these are some of the things that we would pick up in the market, in these markets. So even when we go to other markets, which are the non-traditional ones, say in Central America or so, we would pick up issues like distribution, registration issues, and part of our task would be to enamel like our exportTT also to work with the potential exporters to develop mechanisms to treat with some of these problems. So we have different kinds of problems depending on which markets you go to.
Sure. So what you're saying in essence is that it's essentially on a case-by-case basis?
Yes, well, the thing is that all problems are not synonymous with all markets. Different markets have different problems, and as the problems arise, you have to treat with them. And a significant factor too is what kind of support we have on the ground, which is one of the issues.
Thank you, PS. Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions, one for trade and industry and one for EXIMBANK. So I'll start off first with trade and industry. I'm referring to pages 22 and 23 of your report under maritime. Now I see we have a national maritime policy, and as a subset of that policy, I would say we have a yachting policy for the period 2017-2021. And then as a subset of that, I see we have a mariner sector. Do you think that the proposed facility in Tobago, which we have been speaking about a long time, that maritime industry should be part of the diversification strategy, how do you see that facility in Tobago finally getting the maritime sector to be part of the diversification trust? And do you think it's something that is needed in Tobago? Do you think it's something that could be a net forex earner sometime in the future? Anyone?
Okay, I was not sure whether you were asking two questions, so I should just answer this, Chair?
Yeah.
All right, so the maritime sector, we envisage, and taking our cue from what the governmental directives, we see that as one of the areas for diversification. And we are in tandem in collaboration with major stakeholders. The Ministry of Works and Transport is a key area because maritime properly falls under that institution. However, the business of maritime we are particularly concerned with. And you mentioned Tobago and yachting. In terms of yachting, we had some interactions to bring about some support for that area because it was an area that was losing ground to some of the other CARICOM countries that are close by, like Grenada and so. And in terms of the Tobago issue, properly that would be under the ambit of the THA. However, we are here to provide the support necessary in bringing about the economic activity that could be associated with such a marina. And it is a very important nexus to tourism. And as we move towards adding that added dimension to that industry, we would be working with the THA and so to get it going. On the broader note, the maritime policy, we are in partnership with the Ministry of Works and Transport, currently trying to invite tenders for the provision of a policy, and we are in the procurement stage. So it all fits into that ambit, and we do see it, the Marine and Tobago, the yachting scenario, as key elements of the diversification effort.
Great.
Okay. Member has a follow-up.
I'm glad to hear it, because we need to compete with the other islands up north. And I think a major competitive advantage we always speak about, we are not in a hurricane belt. So I really urge all of us to finally get on stream with this. My next question, Madam Chair, because I have another joint select in 10 minutes to go to. I just want to ask a question to the EXIMBANK. Page 5 of your report, which speaks to 4 manufacturers in 4 sectors that facilities were approved for: furniture and appliances, building and construction, food and beverage, and cosmetics. Statistically, cosmetics and toiletries doesn't seem to feature, because if you add up the percentages of the other 3, they come out to 100%, correct? On your pie chart, where cosmetics and toiletries, which are in red, statistically does not seem to be important, statistically unimportant.
Well,
I want to ask...
This is a limited sample of,
Yes.
of repeat customers.
Okay, great. So the question is, from a statistical perspective, if 51% goes towards building and construction, furniture and appliances 14%, and food and beverage 35%, and that adds up to 100. Do you think there is growth potential? What sort of growth potential? You may not be able to give me an actual figure, but do you think anecdotally there is growth potential? And the question really is, can these industries transition eventually to net forex earners instead of being net forex consumers? So that's basically the question.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Member, for that good question. Just before I continue, I just want to commend this JSC for convening this hearing on looking at the opportunities for trade outside of CARICOM. And the reason for that is that it aligns perfectly with the first challenge identified in the Vision 2030, which states expanding exports and increasing foreign exchange earnings and employment. And we are quite pleased that there is some focus from the JSC on this issue, and we are happy to be part of the team that is charged to move that forward. Regarding the issue about opportunities in these sectors, as you know, many of my colleagues here will know, the food and beverage sector is a relatively strong exporting sector for Trinidad, and definitely they can continue to penetrate markets as well. I do want to clarify that this specific pie chart is for customers that have accessed the Forex facility more than once. And I thought it would be useful to at least explain to the committee a little bit about how the actual facility works. In fact, in the mindset of moving towards a very transparent model, what we've come up with is a calculation that is all companies will know that they can access this level of facility. And there are 2 components to the calculation that companies can access. One, a working capital piece of foreign exchange, which is based on their export sales and their cost of goods sold attributed to those export sales. And that amount they can access every cash conversion cycle, which is typically between every 3 to 6 months for companies. So these companies here that you were speaking about were able to use that for the first 3 months or 6 months and then come back again. However, and I'm happy for the opportunity for the public to be made aware, that on the first instance, the Forex facility, we have redesigned the calculations in collaboration with the TTMA, and actually did some empirical testing with some of their membership before we came back out with redesigned calculations that would better meet their needs. And as a result of that testing, our new calculation of today is on the first instance, companies, exporters and manufacturers can access at least 50% of the international current trade payables. So that is a very good view because it allows the company to just look at their numbers and see if this makes sense for them to proceed. And that has helped a significant amount of companies. And that 50% of international trade payables is an option for companies to access, but only once a year. And so coming back, these companies and these sectors that you were talking about were the ones that were able to pass one cash conversion cycle and reaccess. But most definitely, we do see opportunity in the food and beverage. In the building and construction, I think our manufacturers have a very strong position within the CARICOM market. It does become a little tougher for them to compete as they move outside due to competitive measures. My chairman mentioned we have a new product that is just in the process of being approved, and that product is designed specifically to deal with the competitiveness issues and support increasing competitiveness.
Just briefly, because I have to leave for another joint select now. What are some of those competitive pressures that we face outside of CARICOM? Because this report deals mainly for trade outside of CARICOM. So I think the public might be interested to know what are some of these barriers that our manufacturers face as we try to trade outside of CARICOM?
Well, we've been able to have a solid CARICOM market because, let's call it, the larger multinationals are not that interested in going through the process to serve a number of small markets. It's not as efficient for them, where we have formed a specialty for that. But I would say there are two major reasons why we are not as competitive. One is pricing, and the pricing is due to a number of different factors in terms of our economies of scale for our manufacturers. When we have a manufacturer that deals with a market of 10 million, but you have other manufacturers in other countries that are dealing with 50 or 100 million, our economy scales are pressured. But one other area is the internal company marketing and ability to convey the value proposition of these companies to external stakeholders. I think that is another factor that is in play.
Dr. Henry.
Morning, everyone, again. I have quite a few things I'd like to touch on, but let me start with P.S. Herbert. If you could update us on what is happening with the European Partnership Agreement 11 years later. Have we seen any significant benefits from that EPA?
I think we signed it in 2008, and we have had staggered implementation or partial implementation. So when we did the legislation, we approved certain elements to be introduced and other aspects to be introduced later on as we develop. So, for instance, in customs brokerage and intellectual property, telecommunications, those were deferred aspects. We had undertaken to put the tariff arrangement in place. Some of that we are still struggling with even today. And in terms of our access, the real benefit was that we were able to access the market without limitation, so that where we had access, it was now assured under the agreement. So you always have to compare that with what it could have been, not necessarily what it was, right?
Yeah, but have we seen any practical benefits?
So in some areas, we have been able to start in certain areas, like in exportTT had some services elements in a couple countries that was facilitated under the development support cooperation under the agreement, because the EDF is linked back to the regional EDF is linked back to the EPA, and then there are...
PS, could I just ask you to pause so that we could get the example from exportTT, from someone from exportTT?
Madam Chair, in terms of trade with the European Union under the EPA, we have had both goods and services being exported. Companies like one of the larger ones would be SM Jalil, who has accessed the agreement to enter into markets such as England, Holland, for the most part. And in terms of services, in the IT arena, we've had animation organizations locally getting international contracts to provide animation services to the European Union.
Okay. PS, you want to add something?
Yeah, Chair, I think that he's forgetting about the Fit for Europe project, which benefit, and maybe he will want to say something about that.
Would you, Mr. Gishad?
Thank you, Chair. It was a little before my time, so if it's okay, I will ask one of my members of staff who was actually present when that was implemented to give some information on it.
Okay. Dhanraj, exportTT. So there are two main initiatives that was geared towards the European Union. The first was using the French Caribbean outermost regions as a sort of testing ground, since it has similar standards, similar characteristics to mainland Europe, France. So there was a project that was executed with EU funds, received under the EDF for that project, where we had a number of successes where we got exporters actually getting into that market in the food and beverage, and some in the manufacturing sector, construction sector. And then that was followed up by the Fit for Europe project, where we looked at 3 markets in mainland Europe, which were the UK, Netherlands, and France. And we took, I think it was a total, the project actually included an element of capacity building. If exporters are looking at markets in terms of ease of access, they would see CARICOM first, then North America, maybe Latin America in terms of logistics. But the European market tends to be something that is a lot more difficult because of the high standards and the quality of the products that are prevailing in the market. So, and distance as well, the logistics. So it was a capacity building project so that we could build up the ability and the readiness of exporters to actually get into those markets and penetrate those markets. They could see and meet with buyers in the market to understand what exactly they're looking for, who are their current suppliers, and what sort of characteristics they would look at in terms of moving from one buyer to another. So there were some successes, as Mr. Gishad mentioned, but it's pretty much a working process, and a lot of our exporters are much more understanding of what is necessary to get into those markets. But we have seen some successes in the creative arena, particularly with respect to ICT and animation, but there were a few of our craft manufacturers who were able to link up with smaller fashion manufacturers in the market, and since the products were somewhat complementary.
Okay, before I leave that topic, I want to just get some idea. What about the other side of the trade equation? Has there been any significant increases in imports from the EU because we opened up to them as well?
Well, I think if 10 years later, it's a bit too premature to tell you that. And that's because many of the tariff adjustments that are required on our side, have not been legislated because of the new tariff that customs has to put in place and that sort of thing. So, and there have been precedents to move that to that stage. But so the impact hasn't really been noticeable on this side, but we have seen some improvements here. But I think the major benefit is the improvements in regulatory arrangements in terms of cooperation that is tied to the agreements, like in the areas of intellectual property or those sort of even standards and That's what I think that those were some of the areas that we were able to work on, and whilst we have not fully realized the outcome of that, we have been making progress, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in the rest of CARICOM.
Some idea. I know it's so. What you're really saying is that a lot of the benefits haven't been in trade, has been in the peripheral areas.
Member?
Thank you. I had checked the ease of doing business index, and I saw that it has fallen from about 86 to 103, meaning that it becomes more and more difficult for manufacturers here to gain entry and to procure markets out of Trinidad and Tobago, regionally, internationally. When I look at the report from the Ministry of Trade, I am looking at a plethora of policies, I'm seeing measures and initiatives and so. So despite all these policies and initiatives, it seems that even you are trying to provide an enabling environment for manufacturers, things are not happening as they ought to. Are there any contributing factors, or what do you think might attribute and contribute to these, what you call obstacles or hurdles for manufacturers to penetrate the market?
The issue of ease of doing business is one that I think should engage all of us. Right? We do have a number of policies which some we have started, some we are working on, some we have implemented, and I guess they have a sequence. In addition to that, we have actual projects which deals with some of the characteristics under the ease of doing business, like trading across border. And one of the key areas is the TT BizLink project, where we have tentacles in various areas. So we have in the customs area, we have in the payments area, we have in the processing, we have automated processing, etc. And should these elements be properly realized, and I will ask Mr. Karim, the Director of Policy, to further explain, but should these areas be realized, then we feel pretty certain that we can make substantial improvements. However, there are challenges. So, Chair, with your permission, can I ask Director of Policy to further elaborate on
Certainly.
that area? Thank you, PS, Chair, members. As the Permanent Secretary indicated, there are a range of initiatives and projects being implemented by the Ministry of Trade over the last 10 years to improve the ease of doing business. Because as the member rightly indicated, a competitive business environment does play a major role in helping our individual firms to be competitive and to, as EXIMBANK indicated, to have the efficiencies to be able to export. We at the Ministry of Trade have been playing our part in improving the ease of doing business through our platform, TT BizLink, where we have currently 47 e-services available online. And we have been constantly attempting to re-engineer, automate, and make efficient those core processes to assist manufacturers and service providers to export more efficiently. So in the last 10 years, some of the major innovations include the ability of the business community to make electronic customs declarations to Customs and Excise, have those import-export declarations processed by TT BizLink online. We have made certificates of origin under exportTT electronic. Previously, it took 2 weeks to get a certificate of origin in the manual and paper environment. Now it takes literally a few minutes in the electronic world. And of course, we have automated all of the various import-export permits. But as the Permanent Secretary indicated, ease of doing business is something that should that the entire national community should really look at, because it is not only about the Ministry of Trade, because there are a number of agencies within throughout the government system that speaks to a competitive business environment. Our ministry have been helping, and through an IDB loan, of assisting those other agencies to automate and improve. In the next month, the national community will witness the rollout of an automated construction permitting system, which will see all of the various permits and licenses and regulatory permits for persons to get, for the business community and exporters to be able to get tongue and country approvals, electricity connection, water connections, etc. online. So we have been doing our part, but we must also bear in mind that while Trinidad and Tobago, while we are doing and trying our best, our export competitors are working much faster than we are. So we have seen a sort of static performance in the ease of doing business. But we need to be mindful that when we talk about export markets and competition, the international community are much more aggressive at tackling the various indicators and ease of doing business.
The other thing is that I'm looking at this, again, this disclosed documents here, and I'm seeing you have A class, B class, and C class. A class ready to export, and you have B and C. When I look at the different trade missions, we are seeing trade mission to Panama, you have 83 business-to-business meetings. You have to Colombia, 48, and to Canada, you have 50. So you have 181 business-to-business missions. And out of it, you have 10 generated as Class A for Panama, 10 to Colombia, and you have 9, both 9 in Colombia and 9 in Canada, sorry. So you have 28 Class A. So when we look at and we try to see what is that percentage, you have about 16% of it being Class A. So how long does it take now for these B and C to move up to Class A? So at least you could have something generated, because you don't have a time frame, because maybe it's just left in abeyance. I'm not sure, I'm just asking. And of those 28 that have been generated, what are they actually exporting? Are these people, they exporting and penetrated the markets in Panama, in Colombia, and Canada? No?
Chair, I think we need some clarification in it. The issue of classifying the businesses is a procedure that exportTT uses to work with firms. So they seek to rank firms so that they could provide treatment for the firms. It's like if you are ill, they would send you to diabetes clinic, or depending on what you have. So they rank firms. And
well, PS, perhaps we could ask a rep from
yes, I think exportTT can explain it fully. So because there's also an explanation for the missions, because the B2B things are the meetings that happen in trade missions. So maybe exportTT could.
So I'm just need to clarify. We need to know what treatment then B has to undertake to move to A.
Members, Madam Chair, there is no doubt that Trinidad and Tobago, in terms of exporting to the region, is doing a fantastic job, and we dominate, and we are the exporters to the CARICOM and Caribbean region. Breaking entry into the extra-regional markets and so on we haven't done as well as the CARICOM region. Converting an A lead into business, or a B into an A for potential business in the future, in terms of our experience in extra-regional markets, take approximately 1 year to so do. The trade mission And the actual setting up of the B2B meetings and conducting the meetings are a first step. So in order to facilitate the movement of A, into actual transactions and export of hard goods and services, and B, moving up the chain to get into an A position, takes a year on average, and there are other complementary support and services that are necessary to get these manufacturers into those different areas.
Thank you. I want to ask a question of the PS of the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs, and you will find that some of the questions you get are questions which require big answers, and some of the questions will be to address the concerns of particular groups. So what I want to ask is, does the embassy have a role to play in this situation where local manufacturers had provided goods and or services to companies in Venezuela and they haven't been paid? Is there any facilitation of that by the ministry?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, with, I suppose, varying degrees of success or not. And that is in an official capacity, liaising with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Venezuela, bringing to its attention the challenges being experienced by our manufacturers.
Okay, let me let PS Herbert, what you going to add?
Chair, just to add to the response here, in treating with that, it's a very complicated situation, so it has to be treated at different levels. So, for instance, Foreign Affairs would liaise with the foreign institution, where the Ministry of Trade would be interacting with Corpovex, which is the institution through which the agreements were signed with various manufacturing. Then TTMA itself has its own persons on the ground, and all three measures provide some success, but not a total success. So what I'm saying is a kind of multi-dimensional approach to that problem.
Okay. I'm looking at a table here that was submitted. I assume it was from the Ministry of Trade in terms of the TNT non-energy exports to non-CARICOM countries in the region. Or to non-CARICOM countries or regions, sorry. And the figures don't look too good. We seem to be on the decline. Right? We're not. If you just look at the overall totals, 13 billion down to about 8 billion projected 2018 from 13 billion 2015. And particularly eye-catching is the UK market. We just talked about the EPA. And from 408 million down to 47 million in 20. Could we get some kind of explanation why we don't seem to be looking so good?
Yes, we are familiar with the table that I think it was from 2015 to 2018, and the projections, especially in 2017 and 2018, looked on the way down. But what we must remember is the international context that we were operating in that period. And while there are many factors that contribute, that is one, then the commodity pricing issue is another. And we have seen that decline. If you look at the graph, it would have a downward slope, but what we have noticed is that it has picked up a bit in between 2018 and 2019, first half in terms of projections. So we are expecting that in 2019, the trend would be a bit improved. So, I mean, facts are facts, you know, and the non-energy of the 66 billion that we trade in, say, in 2018, some 83% is extra-regional, and of that extra-regional, about 13% is on the 13% is non-energy, right? So one of the things we have to recall, I know that there's this myth that trade deals only with non-energy, but when you deal with a trade agreement doesn't distinguish or it doesn't separate the treatment between energy and non-energy. You have to consider the whole parameter. The HS deals with every physical thing on the face of Earth, and you have to negotiate that. Everything carries a tariff, whether it's zero or whether it's something else.
Okay, but since the figure for the UK in particular seemed to have gone down so significantly, it leads me to another question. I know there's been a lot of forum on the impact of Brexit and the potential it may have on the Caribbean. Have you, have you worked on that, and what is this leading to? I mean,
Perhaps I could ask for a response from the Director of European Affairs.
Good morning again, Chair and members. With reference to that issue, it's something that we have been treating with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in conjunction with the Ministry of Trade. In the pre-existing environment, the UK, as a member of the European Union, would have been a part of the same CARICOM European Union EPA that we would have signed on to more 10, 11 years ago. And under the terms of that agreement, that is how the trade would have been carried out. In anticipation of the exit of the UK from the EU, there has been the conclusion of a CARICOM UK EPA, which will take effect when the UK leaves the EU, at whatever point that takes place. The purpose of that essentially was to roll over the terms and conditions of the CARICOM EU EPA into a CARICOM UK EPA. So from that point of view, there should be no interruption in terms of trade. It should just carry on as is.
But this table doesn't really give us that kind of indicator. In fact, it doesn't foster much confidence. And when I look at the next line on the table, now that Dr. Henry has kindly brought it to our attention, we see a huge drop in our non-energy exports to the EU from 2015 to 2018. Can we get some sort of explanation for that?
Chair, I will ask Mr. Kaimo, Ms. Lewis to.
Fortuitously, both of us are sitting right next to each other. I want to let the committee know that we too were alarmed when we prepared the table, but we need to consider that the figures need to be understood within the context. The closure of the Mittal steel plant in 2000 and I believe it was 17 or 18 would have significantly affected the overall non-energy exports. So that because we have to understand that right now, iron and steel is considered non-energy, right? So when you look at the figures, it looks alarming that you're seeing this dramatic decline in non-energy export. But if you excise the iron and steel component, the overall non-energy export figure is not as reflected here.
Do you have it?
Yes, we can share that.
Could you tell us?
For
if you exclude iron and steel,
well, I can share with the committee, as the permanent secretary indicated, and these are figures our minister would have made available to Parliament during her budget contribution. We have looked at the January to July 2019 non-energy export figures from the CSO versus the January to July 2018 non-energy exports, and there was a 9% increase from 5.21 billion over for first 7 months of this year to as opposed to 4.78 billion in 2018. So we have seen an increase in non-energy exports from the first 7 months of this year to last year.
Okay, so then that takes me to the next logical question. So what's going to happen now with ammonia not being exported? Because that's referred to in the trade policy, not so? The trade policy which was laid in Parliament in November of this year. Do we export ammonia to either of these markets?
Chair, your question is valid, and you must bear in mind that trade is a living discipline. Today you can be dependent on one industry, and that industry could be impacted, and you have to readjust, you have to recalibrate your plans. And of course, we heard of the recent intended closure of an industry, and we have started to look at what are the options. Of course, something like ammonia does not fall neatly under Ministry of Trade, but we have to work with our sister agencies that are responsible for that. So that is one of the items on the block that we will have to be treating with in this upcoming period.
Sure, I appreciate that's an ongoing thing. Dr. Henry, do you have a question?
I saw something called She Trades initiative, targeting women entrepreneurs, able and is poised to assist women to transform their business ideas into export-ready potential. I look at creative TT, which is responsible also for niche subsectors such as fashion. Recently, I saw at the Trinidad Hilton, there was some fashion show, and we had some of the women there, designers, who were complaining that, yes, we have beautiful clothing here, but they cannot procure a market, and they need to know what to do and how it could be translated to take their stuff out of this country to perhaps regional and extra-regional. And is there some way these women could come to the Ministry of Trade, or they could be guided as to how to get their product out? Because they themselves were expressing the difficulty in doing business and getting their product out.
The She Trade initiative is an international platform which we are trying to tap into, and we have a project here towards treating that. With that, I'll ask Ms. Lewis if she could comment on it.
Through the PS, to Chair and the member, yes, as PS said, the She Trades initiative is an online platform of women entrepreneurs. It's being run by the International Trade Center in Geneva, and we have started the process. So we've engaged a consultant who has been to Trinidad and Tobago, and we're in the process of identifying the traders who can be on that platform. But to date, unfortunately, we don't have a start date yet for the program, but what we understand is that internationally there's been so much interest in the initiative that ITC has had to slow down a little bit, because like all the members, all the countries want to be on the She Trade platform. So yes, this is an initiative that will allow small traders like the fashion producers, the persons who make garments, to be able to sell their products directly to international buyers that may wish the product. The program also does provide some training on how to get ready for export and how to help the small traders be able to meet the logistic requirements to be able to sell their products overseas. Thank you.
So I could presume, as invariably it is just in the embryonic stage right now. The second question, since we are talking about diversifying the economy, you have heard that talk so many times. PAN, a tenner pan sells for about 5,000 US. Do we have tuners, pan tuners, that come for support through the Ministry of Trade so they could get some assistance, the know-how, monetary, otherwise, whatever initiative or policy you have in place, so these tuners could get their pans, their tenner pans, sold in an international market? Like, take, for example, Japan. They are doing extremely well when we're supposed to be perhaps in the pinnacle. So is it, we have some avenue where these tuners can come? Perhaps it's existing, but they're not aware. Perhaps you can enlighten us?
Chair, I would not say that we have a holistic arrangement for the steel band community. However, we have, I think that it will be more with the Ministry of Culture, but we have had elements that treated with that. So, for instance, we had a European funded project, and we did help some exporters within the last 5 years. All right. In addition, we currently have an arrangement which has recently been approved by Cabinet, which deals with grant funding facility. We have a special carve-out for the business of pan tuning, and we hope that that will contribute towards the effort. Now, I hear you with respect to facilitation in the export market, and that is something that we, through CreativeTT has not traditionally been with kind of that responsibility, but I do anticipate that that is one of the areas that we will have to seek to enforce as we move along. But we have moved into the stage where we are providing the domestic support for the manufacture of the steel drum in particular, because you may not know, but the drum itself is a problem, and the whole steel band community is suffering for that at that time. So we had introduced this element in the grant funding facility where we hope that that can help ameliorate the problem.
I'm aware of the steel drums exuding the chemicals that these pan men, they inhale, and many of them eventually die of some chemical inhalation. So I'm aware of it.
So
that's another issue.
So the intention is to move to the steel, having the steel. It's not the used drums, but the steel where you go from the steel to provide the skirting to the rim, and the equipment is already there in Macoya, and it is hoped that will help that process.
I think the real move now really is robotics, where they are actually setting up this whole system.
Okay, I have some questions for the reps from the EXIMBANK. I believe you all were moved from Ministry of Trade to the Ministry of Finance. Can you just remind me when that was?
That was sometime in 2018. I believe it's around September or August of 2018.
Sure. So perhaps what you could, I'm just assuming that the purpose of the move was for regulation, or was there another basis for it?
Chairman, I believe the reason for that was when the Ministry of Finance decided to allocate the $100 million Forex facility. Is at that point in time that we were moved to the Ministry of Finance. So I guess that may have been the reason.
Yes. So I take it you all have to supply reports and so on to the ministry. Do you?
Yes, we supply reports.
Is that elective, or do you have a mandatory reporting system to the ministry?
We have our reporting requirements to both the central bank and the Ministry of Finance, and that I believe, was in place even before this line ministry move. As a financial institution, we have to continue to fulfill those requirements.
See in your presentation that you spoke of having a decrease in your assets for the financial year ending December 2017. What was the reason for that?
Chairman, the main reason for that was when we adopted the IFRS 9 accounting policy. In our books, we had some legacy loans that were not adequately provided for, but with the advent of IFRS 9, it was a requirement, and that impacted our balance sheet negatively.
So for somebody like me, who doesn't know anything about finance, essentially you just booked it differently?
Chairman, this was a new accounting principle that all companies had to adopt. It was a new requirement for provisioning. It has to do with bad debts, and it also goes to the extent of even when you book a loan, at day one, you also have to make a provision. So that has impacted all companies with the IFRS 9. And in our particular case, there was a one-off provisioning that we had to do, just like all other companies, and this was what impacted our balance sheet.
Yeah, I want to go back to the table just for 1 second, just to note that there was a bright spot on it wasn't all gloom and doom, that in terms of our non-energy exports to non-CARICOM regions, the area that seems to be the best area of potential seems to be Africa on this, because the figures are quite good in going from 104 million to over $1 billion 2018, right? Were you aware of that, and what is driving that?
Yeah, we were aware that those two bottom lines there had showed improvements in the table, and we believe that it's energy related.
But no, I thought this was supposed to be non-energy.
Yeah, well, the thing is that we have a broader statistical problem which the committee might be well advised to take charge of in terms of what is energy and what is not energy. And as a country, what we consider, because depending on the agency that you deal with, what is considered energy in one place may not be considered energy in another place.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from.
I'm sorry, I don't. Is it a question of categorization? Who categorizes and who changes?
All right, I'll ask Mr. Kime to give you the exact classification issue.
Okay, in fact, it's fortuitous. I think there's a JSC on the National Statistical Institute parallel to this session. As the PS and members observed, just give me 1 minute to explain it. All trade data is generated by the customs entries that brokers and clerks file with the Customs and Excise Division. Those declarations are then sent to the CSO, and the CSO, because there are several mistakes and errors in the entries, there's this laborious activity where these officers of the CSO go through to sanitize the trade data and make corrections. Now, in Trinidad and Tobago, it is a fact that at this present time, there is no common agreement between all of the arms of government about what is energy and non-energy. So if you look at the publications being produced by the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, and the CSO, you will see different vernacular being used. So for example, if you look at the annual review of the economy, it says trade in mineral fuels, trade excluding mineral fuels. That actually includes, it's just oil and gas, and the trade excluding mineral fuels includes ammonia, iron, and steel. the balance of payments produced by the central bank, which uses the HS classifications. And just to indicate, there are two different types of classification methodology. So the CSO and customs use the harmonized system of customs classification, HS. The central bank uses the SITC figures, which is based on the UN standard.
Would you, let me ask you this. So the table is based on which one?
It's based on, depending on which source you're pulling from, it may be based in different years on a combination of classifications. And that is one of the things we alluded to in our response earlier. When you look at non-energy exports, it's very difficult to tell. Unless you delve deep into line-by-line items, it's very difficult to discern or say definitively which sub-items or which sub-products are moving. We have made, the Ministry of Trade has made representation to the Joint Select Committee on that side. We have made proposals for the need to harmonize that classification. We do have a submission we intend through our minister to make to the cabinet for government to sort out this challenge, because it causes a lot of uncertainty and inaccurate policy analysis by different agencies in commentating about energy and non-energy export performance.
Well, perhaps then you could just clear it up for us in relation. Well, first of all, I'm shocked that African countries, many of them are oil rich. And once you think about energy, you think about oil. So when I see this huge jump, first of all, which African countries have our non-energy exports increased to? And what products? Are they all energy-based products included in this table?
Submit. I think it will be better off Chair submitting that to the committee maybe later by next week.
Okay, thank you. It would be lovely to clarify that. We also see that the non-energy exports to Latin America. Now, it's kind of difficult when we just put it in groupings like these, because there are many countries involved in our export arrangements. We see it's been cut in half. Is that basically because of the situation in Venezuela?
We will complete that submission.
Yeah. Okay, we'll leave that issue there for now. As the PS said, you could inform us later on. What I want to tackle this issue of incentives, and I particularly want to hear from the people involved with the businesses directly, like the EXIMBANK or maybe the exportTT. The governments over the years have provided quite a bit of incentives to exporters or potential exporters. And since I've been in this parliament, which is almost 10 years now, a lot has been offered in successive budgets. What is the reason that you hear from our producers as to why these incentives don't work, or why is there any problem that needs to be addressed with the issue of incentives?
Member, the issue of incentives from exportTT's perspective, we manage one in particular, the research and development facility, where we incentivize manufacturers, local manufacturers, to be innovative and make innovation improvements into their production and business facilities. I am pleased to say that the amount that we are allocated has been oversubscribed. We are allocated by the ministry $1 million in project spend in this area, and we've had over $1.3, $1.4 million in applications. So from exportTT's perspective in that regard, it is being fully utilized and oversubscribed for the most part. We are also involved with the Ministry of Trade in terms of the grant for small and medium-sized manufacturers and exporters, whereby we provide funding for the purchase of manufacturing and equipment and plant. That I think that could be accessed more and in greater amounts by local manufacturers. And one of the feedback we get from local manufacturers and the challenge in accessing the grant is the provision of financial data, audited financials, for that is a requirement for the application to be processed. Small and medium-sized companies sometimes do not engage in external audited financials, and the ministry has, in treating with the public's financing in a responsible way, has come up with solutions to facilitate the process a lot smoother. So I envision that going forward, we will see a greater utilization of that incentive.
Okay, under the ministry submission, PS, but you have a draft services policy for Trinidad and Tobago 2019-2023, right? And under that heading, in terms of measures, strategies, one of the things you flagged is to develop a clear, predictable incentive regime for investment in the services industry. That's in your document. Could you help us understand what that is about?
All right. Well, just as it says to develop, so we are developing. But the point is that on the good side, right, as you said, over the years you have seen many support and that sort of thing. In the services side, it's a bit more difficult, and we have been trying to work with the service industry to see what kind of support, because very often their difficulty is of a regulatory nature, because services, as you know, are provided in different forms, either modes 1, 2, 3, or 4, right? And we have been working with them to try to see what, because the support required for the cultural artists is very different to the kind of support required for, say, the engineer, So, like, some are institutional, some are of a, but you hardly find the financial thing coming out on top. What we want to do is to clearly identify our export registry for services providers. And we are currently in a project with the Trinidad and Tobago Services Coalition, who's supposed to be the umbrella organization for that membership. So as we develop that, we are able now to go in sector by sector, subsector by subsector, and get the kind of information we need, because services statistics, if you think good statistics is difficult, services statistics are extremely difficult, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in the broader
Yes, I know. I've tried.
And, and we, for years, we have been using mirror data from some of those developed countries who are able to tell us what our service providers did in their domain. So we mirror that data and use that. But we are working to establish our own database so that we can engage the services provider. Of course, part of the problem has to do with taxation and those sort of issues.
Sure. P.S., could I just pause to put out two questions that we've got from members of the public. One person looking on says this: trade from Tobago is a nightmare. Are there any initiatives planned to ease this or to assist local producers to get their products to international markets? Are there difficulties unique to Tobago's export situation? And if so, how are they addressed?
Well, clearly, the question is about products and not services. All right, so we just started a discussion with Tobago, the THA. We launched a trade policy last week, and this week we engaged in a business and economic outlook, and we had some discussions there. But the Tobago is really a micro situation to Trinidad. And of course, with the added dimension of goods moving from Scarborough to Port of Spain, and some of the issues that plague business providers in Trinidad are applicable to issues coming from Tobago. And of course, the additional support that might be required inside of Tobago is one of the factors that would be key in the discussion that will take place between our situation here at MTI and over at the THA. So as we discuss, those elements will take focus.
So essentially what you're saying is the THA has to adopt this policy, or
well,
is it accepted that they should?
The trade policy is for Trinidad and Tobago, right? So that includes the Tobago. Now, the THA has also developed their own economic document, which will be compatible with the national effort, and that's where the dialogue is.
Excellent. The other question is, in respect of the ease of doing business index, what are the, let's say, top 5 areas in which Trinidad and Tobago has been performing the best and the worst in? And does the ministry have any plans to target those areas which are not performing well?
I'll ask Mr. Karim to respond to that.
Okay. Trinidad, if you look at the ease of doing business by the World Bank, it is made up of 9 sub-indicators. We have consistently done very well as a country in the area of getting electricity, which we are ranked somewhere between, in the top 50 countries in the world for getting electricity, protecting investors, starting a business. We have continued to have a challenge in some anchor areas that are pulling down our overall performance as it relates to construction permitting. We are somewhere, I think, I don't have the figures in front of me, but it's 120 to 130 out of 188 countries globally. Thankfully, we have, in collaboration with the Ministry of Planning and Development and the Ministry of Trade, over the last 2 years, we have been working on automating that, the entire construction permitting process. And as I indicated earlier, the national community will see a rollout of a nationwide construction permitting solution so that members of the public can now go online. I can't disclose the name of the URL as yet because that's for the Ministry of Planning. In the next less than 1 month from today, you can go online and get your town and country planning, outline and final planning permissions, go online and get the WASA approvals, the regional corporation approval, the OSH approvals, the EMA approvals. So construction permitting is one of the indicators that we've been performing badly, and we're working on that. But outside of our immediate domain at the ministry, there is the issue of registering property. And I know the chair as a distinguished attorney at law would know the difficulties in property registrations in the country. That actually, we are ranked very poorly globally. We are like 140 something out of 188 countries in the globe. And the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs have been doing quite a bit of work over the last couple of years to overhaul the legislative framework. There's an IDB loan that is being administered under that ministry to automate the civil registry, the property registration process, and you would see the national community can expect to see the impact of those reforms. But then there's an interesting one, the Chair, as an attorney at law, enforcing contracts. That is the area where we perform the worst in the overall ease of doing business ranking. And enforcing contracts relates to how long it takes for commercial cases to be resolved within the judicial process. And as you would appreciate, that's something that falls outside the remit of the executive branch of government. And because of that indicator, so I think we are like 170 something out of 180 countries globally for the length of time it takes to resolve a commercial dispute at the high court level. We have been doing our part within Ministry of Trade and the wider executive to fix companies' registry and construction permitting, trading across borders, property registration. But as we started off saying at the early, ease of doing business is something that's both all the branches of government have to come together to address.
Quick question for EXIMBANK rep. As I indicated, some of these questions will be simple because we have all different kinds of people listening and wanting to get information. What are the determining factors used for the selection of clients to benefit from your Forex facility? Is that something that could be answered simply?
Very simply is you need to be exporting. That is the main requirement. Right now, the facility is targeted to the manufacturers, and we do confirm export sales as part of the process. If you have not yet started to export, we will accept an export plan that shows, but we haven't had many of those applications as yet.
What would happen in a situation where you approve someone as an exporter and let's say, you know, they didn't have the quality control for the product that was necessary and so on? What do? Do you simply cut your funding?
Well, what happens is, specifically with the Forex facility, is, as I mentioned, you can come back for additional tranches. And when you do come back for second and third tranches, we do look to see that US dollars are being repatriated back into Trinidad and back into your account. And if that is not evident, that money is coming back to Trinidad for you to reinvest, then we will not be able to proceed with that facility.
I have noted MIT submission that states pharmaceutical products and non-ferrous metals were identified as untapped opportunities in terms of higher value added products. I need to know what category of pharmaceuticals is proposed for output or for export, and if indeed we produce pharmaceuticals here in Trinidad, because if we are looking at chemically based products, it means that we have to import the raw material. And I'm trying to figure out, would that be counterproductive if we are using scarce foreign exchange to import this raw material and then to produce it here and then to export it? So I don't know how you could reconcile it, boss.
Chair, I first wish to indicate that we are talking about legal pharmaceuticals.
I must confess the same thought crossed my mind.
For years we have had thriving chemically based pharmaceutical industry, and I think that on the periphery has been the herbal side of things, but I don't think that dimension has been developed to the extent even within our domestic borders in terms of the formal context. So I think that if we are talking about the pharmaceuticals, so it would be the chemically developed bit, which is imported at different stages. Some is the raw material, some is the intermediary products, and it services both the domestic market and the export market. So I don't know if that provides any clarification, but that is my understanding of the industry at this point in time, not being a herbalist.
I'm sorry. I have to repeat it. Okay, in your submission, you have highlighted that some of the challenges faced by businesses in facilitating extra-regional trade are opaque, discriminatory, and arbitrary. You need to elucidate what those words mean. Like,
I think it's directly related to what the vice chairman of the committee alluded to. When we look at what our exporters tell us in some of our non-CARICOM markets, it is very difficult to discern how the different various technical regulations are changing in markets. So it takes quite a bit of time for exportTT to go to market to understand the various the evolving nature of the various technical standards. Sometimes, literally, it's rapidly evolving. It changes overnight.
can I intercede? Is it then that each division, they are sitting in silos and they don't know what the other one is doing? Or is it that you have a system where you could easily access information throughout? Or is it that everybody is an independent institution?
Just to offer an answer, I think that there are some areas that we have international systems which throw up regulations and changes. For instance, we have the Bureau of Standards at the gateway, where by international requirements, every country that is introducing a new measure is supposed to notify it in a certain way, because there are committees at the WTO, committees on the contractual arrangements, and there's a system. When they get these notifications, they are to circulate it to all government and private sector and have inputs by a certain time. So to the extent that they fall within that network, that's the arrangement by which the problems are shared. The solutions might be a bit different. Thank you.
Okay, before we proceed, I think somebody from exportTT wanted to make a comment with respect to a question asked by Member Gaideen Gopi Singh earlier.
Yes, Chair. One of the questions posed earlier was whether or not it makes sense in respect to pharmaceutical manufacturing to utilize scarce foreign exchange to purchase raw materials to convert. And I just want to make a general comment that a lot of local manufacturers utilize foreign exchange to bring in raw material because we don't produce a lot of raw materials indigenously. It makes sense from the point of view that the export of the final product is generally of a higher value, so it nets off the importation cost of the raw material and adds a little something in the kitty for the most part. So it is a benefit to invest in foreign exchange in raw material and add value and export at a higher price.
Thank you very much. I just have to direct exportTT's attention to exportTT and EXIMBANK. This one is to exportTT. In your submission, you highlighted a few things, and I just wanted to direct your attention to them. You referred to the database of exporters, which comprise mostly of manufacturers you have certified for duty-free or preferential access. Could you tell us about the process? In summary, what is the process a manufacturer must follow to be certified for duty-free or preferential access? exportTT.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'd ask our Manager of Certification, Mr. Brian Benjamin, to elucidate on that.
An exporter who wishes to export with the new TT BizLink would have to register with TT BizLink. One of the tentacles of TT BizLink is the e-certificate of origins. These e-certificates, the application for e-certificate of origin is done through the TT BizLink. The database referred to is the database where the exporter is registered in TT BizLink, and the data based on the application by the exporter for the certificate of origin would be that database where they make the application. The process for duty-free access into the particular markets are varied and different based on the agreements and the trade certification, the unit of exportTT. Based on these, what are called rules, would visit the manufacturers to ensure that they comply with the rules before the issuance of certificates of origin. But they have to be registered through TT BizLink as that initial point.
Okay, the next area, you refer to exportTT providing co-financing services to assist companies. Now, what would be the responsibility or responsibilities that exportTT take on in these co-financing arrangements?
In general, we support export development activities to new and emerging and also existing exporters. The co-financing facility is a contractual arrangement between exportTT and the exporter, whereby we reimburse exporters for trade-related costs in accessing markets such as the shipping of samples, participation in trade shows and so on. So it is a reimbursable grant whereby prior to engagement in the export-related activity, we enter into an arrangement and a contractual agreement with the exporter, and on completion of the activity, they present their bills and proof of payment and so on, and we reimburse 50% of the expenses to take part in this trade-related activity.
Okay. The third area, you've identified that from time to time you've had to deal with customs to resolve queries raised by CARICOM countries in relation to goods exported from Trinidad and Tobago. Without being specific in terms of the particular exporter, could you give us an idea of what are some of the issues CARICOM countries would raise in relation to products entering their market from Trinidad and Tobago?
Certainly. I'll ask Mr. Benjamin once more to provide that answer.
Built into the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas and the work of the Council on Trade and Economic Development at CARICOM, a country has a right to query goods that are shipped from Trinidad and Tobago. Some of the queries we would have had would be the issue of signatures. We would have had queries pertaining to the interpretation of the rules of origin as stated in the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas. And those are the two major issues, our interpretation or application of the rules and also signatures, which is supposed to be circulated among CARICOM countries, and sometimes at some ports they may not have the circulated signatures, and they may query the authenticity of the certificate of origin that would go with the goods when exported.
Okay, and the last question relates to the export readiness assessment toolkit. Is this something that the Ministry of Trade also has, and how does it compare to anything that the Ministry of Trade has?
Mr. Hari Prasad, could you provide some additional information?
Okay, so an issue that we come across in executing our interventions in markets is it comes up with the business leads that are generated and the ability of our exporters to make the most of those leads possible. So the export readiness assessment allows us to assess exporters to determine their level of readiness to go out to market, to ensure that we identify the best exporters going out to market so that they can make the most of the opportunities that are being given to them through trade missions and trade shows. It assesses exporters in 3 major categories, which is their strategy, export experience, and their capacity. We are utilizing this tool right now to work with, it's pretty much a project that we are piloting with 20 companies currently, and we've been working with those companies. We have assessed them. We have met with them to determine their objectives and done some research for them and built out support plans where exportTT would provide services as well as our other stakeholders like EXIMBANK to provide the services necessary to execute those plans so that they could achieve their objectives and get into the markets that they need to. For most part, the markets that we're trying to focus on are the extra-regional markets because I think we're in CARICOM and we think that it's fairly easy to get into the CARICOM markets. Where there's difficulty and where the assistance is required is in those extra-regional markets. So.
We haven't, before I get to your member, we haven't yet engaged the representative from the Ministry of Finance, Deputy PS. Perhaps you could assist us with something which was set out in your response to our questions. You referred to the fact that the profitability of the EXIMBANK had fallen from 2.92 million in 2015 to a loss of 6.52 million in 2017, and as such should be monitored closely. Now, my understanding from hearing from the EXIMBANK was that this was because of essentially accounting regulations which now had to be complied with. So it's a matter of how you write the books up. If that is so, why is it that the Ministry of Finance is saying that the EXIM should be monitored closely?
Okay, Madam Chair, that standard did not become effective in 2016. It became effective in, I think it was 2017, 2018, I think. But we said that the company needed to be monitored closely because we wanted to know whether profits would continue to fall, right? Now, the IFRS that the chairman was alluding to did impact many state agencies, many companies, and many companies had huge losses as a result. And therefore, it would have been considered that one-off issue. But if it is that for another reason there were losses being made, it had to be considered.
Well, perhaps you could have the answer now from the representative of the EXIMBANK.
Yeah, now this goes back a little bit before my time. However, I will say that the EXIMBANK over the years has supported manufacturers and exporters. And you spoke about incentives, and one of the ways that in the past the bank has supported is by providing rates that would be below market rates. Secondly, another way the bank over the years would have supported would be to take on risk and commercial export transactions that maybe the other commercial banks would not. As a result of those two factors, we have gotten to a place where there are the need to increase provisions and take on and settle some bad debts and so on. That process started around 2017 and so on, and has continued, and we are now kind of getting things sorted out and a solid foundation to go forward with more prudent lending, and it is an area of opportunity. And I do want to just say one thing regarding the competitiveness, and if I could, I mean, I don't want to divert from the question, but we talked about competitiveness, and I just want to bring it back to this foreign exchange piece. There was one area where where the collaboration with the TTMA has been very beneficial. And that is with regard to, because of our close collaboration, we were immediately notified when some shipping lines in the country started levying what they call a currency adjustment factor of 5% on all international shipping costs. This is a very recent phenomenon. We were notified very, very early in the process when it happened to just one or two. And we were then able to respond with our Forex facility in order to be able to make that Forex facility available to cover international shipping costs. So there's great benefits for that close collaboration between the private sector and the public sector. And I think as that continues, it will allow us to continue to write some of those numbers that you see there into the different direction.
Well, that sounds very reassuring. I am going to suggest, unless any member has a burning question, I'm going to suggest that we try to have our closing statements done, because we're due to conclude at 12, and I thank you for indulging the committee with this little extra time. Yes.
I believe one of the challenges to close trade deals is the need to comply with Article 80 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas for regional certification of any trade agreement with third countries. What has the ministry done to treat with that challenge, and what has the ministry implemented in order to comply with Article 80 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas?
Chair, every trade agreement that Trinidad and Tobago, like any other member of CARICOM, engages in with third countries require compliance with that treaty, especially where the tariffs are to be given or reduction in tariffs. So what happens is that there's that exchange where Trinidad and Tobago, the other country, would share that information with the third party so they know that that is a base under which we are talking, which we are negotiating. When the initial negotiations are completed, it goes before the quoted consider where countries may be disadvantaged, and a discussion takes place, and if necessary, Trinidad and Tobago or the other CARICOM country goes back to the third party and you try to negotiate an arrangement. And when that is done, then the CARICOM Secretariat signs off the agreement on behalf of the community. And that's it.
Thank you very much. So I think we will go quickly into closing statements. Where had I begun last? I had begun with you, Mr. Herbert.
Yes, yes, Chair. Chair.
Yes.
On behalf of myself and the rest of the MTI team, we wish to thank the committee for the opportunity to engage in these discussions. I think that it's a very important piece of work that the committee is engaged in, as the entire development and diversification and economic circumstances of the country is influenced by what happens in the extra-regional dimension. And we at the Ministry of Trade and Industry will be only too happy to provide. We already have a couple pieces of information for you, but we'll be willing to provide any additional information which you or your members may wish from the committee, or any documents which we may have that you may wish to partake in. We will be only willing to so assist. Thank you.
We're very grateful for that, because we want to make sure that our report is comprehensive and easy to read at the same time. So can I ask you, Ms. Toussaint, to make a few closing remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This participation for the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs in the committee's meeting today has been very useful, because there were a couple of points that we had not been aware of previously. And I will certainly use the notes that were taken on the questions asked and the responses to inform how we better support the Ministry of Trade and Industry, exportTT, and there are already areas in which we had begun to discuss further collaboration. So thank you very much, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to participate on behalf of my colleagues and myself.
Thank you, Deputy PS, Ministry of Finance. I know we just asked you basically about one issue, but will you be willing to make a quick closing comment?
The representatives of the Ministry of Finance would like to thank the committee for inviting us. I know our input was small, but if you require any further assistance, we would be of service. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Chairman, EXIMBANK.
Madam Chair, I'll defer to one of my board members, Director Lachlan.
Good day, Madam. Again, thank you very much. As I look across the table, I think I'm the only private sector person here at the moment. As a former TTMA president, I can tell you this is one of the few select committees that I would like to see. Maybe if this is the first one and it was a good start, I would love to see more. As an exporter myself, there are lots of problems, but I think you have a very good team here, a good Ministry of Trade, etc. I think just having us together and all of us learning from each other and having one direction will go a long way in making exports much better for Trinidad and Tobago. So I thank you again, Madam Chairman, and those at the table for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Lachlan. It's difficult to see the second row from where we sit. So I apologize that we didn't have any pointed questions directed your way. Perhaps if you return, we can remedy that. Could we have some closing remarks from the CEO of exportTT?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that in general, in terms of exports, we have conquered CARICOM for the most part. Getting and developing trade outside of CARICOM, it's not as simple. And we have outlined a number of challenges here today in terms of our size, all the complexities that are involved in the non-trade barrier areas. But it can be done. And this inquiry is timely, and I'm very grateful that we have had the opportunity to meet and have a focused discussion on it. And just to reassure the panel that we have already started the journey. We have very close working relationship with EXIMBANK, for example. We have signed a number of MOUs with other stakeholders such as the TTMA, CARICOM, and so on, that would really operationalize and go a long way in making a difference in penetrating more markets outside of CARICOM.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your extremely valuable input. I suspect that you can all anticipate that we will have additional questions for you, which we will send in writing. Then we will be seeking your clarification on other matters as well. I want to thank committee members, support staff, media, viewing public, and persons in the public gallery for attending and participating. There's just one announcement, and that is to say that the 7th report of this committee on an inquiry into the wider application of non-custodial penalties in the criminal justice system of Trinidad and Tobago was recently presented to the House of Representatives and the Senate and is now available on the Parliament's website. So, there being no other business, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.